let's create a mini series for you. We'll put it on Shahid. We'll promote it across the whole network. And we've seen that with a lot of brands that have done that on our platform, and it did really well.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Campaign Middle East on the Record podcast, where we speak to leaders here in the region and across the globe about the key trends and challenges facing the Middle East media and advertising landscape. I'm Anup Uman, and joining us on the show is Nicolas Khoury, the Associate Director, Agency Partnerships at MBC Media Solutions, MMS. Nicolas, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here, Nicolas. I want to pick up on that little adage, that phrase that we spoke about just before we started, which is content is king, right? But putting that into the context of Ramadan that we're getting into now, what content performs better than all the others in that sense, that brings in all those hundreds and thousands of eyeballs that brands are looking for? And if I can ask you, why do these specific content formats tend to connect better with people?
Absolutely. So content is king, and everybody's looking for content these days. Everybody's consuming content one way or another, each on a specific platform that they're used to. However, circling back into Ramadan, this is where gathering families happen again on a daily basis. So imagine people are gathering on a daily basis, and yet what we do is we throw in a Superbowl every day for them.
Right.
So technically, you've got an endless number of series that are being pushed into the market that resonate exactly with the audience that is there, ready to consume that content. So I would say it depends on the platform that we're actually running the content on, but on TV specifically, the main source of attraction is comedy, right? It's light. It connects with Saudi specifically because it's about the culture, right? Everything that we blend in is the culture of that content. Yet, when we move into streaming platforms, the main content that runs there are dramas. Because so what happens? I'll just circle back into the whole ecosystem. So behavior changes for Ramadan. So in the morning, people are still somehow lazy. Maybe they're just sleeping. So we start later during the day with cooking shows for people to actually start getting new recipes. And then we put in the social shows. Social shows are very light shows that people don't have to really focus to actually watch. They're just light. People are fasting, some people are at home, some people are at work. They want something very light to watch. Then directly after iftar, this is where we put in the biggest comedy shows for the audience. Everybody's sitting there consuming those.
The whole family is together,
the whole family
watching
together.
on TV, yeah.
Exactly. For 2 or 3 hours, some people are staying there the whole night, because once you move from comedy, you've got the dramas.
Yeah.
Right? And dramas are...
Then you pick up the blanket and you sit and watch it together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what happens that they continue, they take the blanket and they binge. The rest the rest of the audience is when they go and they leave the house for sahur or for asha, and they have, but when they come back, this is when they consume the content on Shahid.
Right.
And this is where Shahid takes the drama content.
Right.
Instead of the comedy. So comedy usually is watched live directly after iftar, and then we switch into dramas.
That is so fascinating. And I want to pick up on this conversation about consumer behavior and consumer preferences, which kind of change a little bit during Ramadan. And there's this perception of it as well, like during Ramadan, the type of content we want to watch is slightly different. The devices that we want to watch is slightly different. The amount of screen time that we have is slightly different. The time of day, like you mentioned, that we watch is slightly different. But these are things that, as a consumer, like as people who are a little observant, you kind of know that there is slight differences. But I want to ask you, do you have actual data that shows that these consumer patterns have changed, consumer behavior has changed, and not just on like what you were mentioning in terms of content consumption, but even in terms of engagement and how they trust brands in and around that time?
Yeah, true. So what happens is data is there. I will not go into the numbers and all of that, but automatically once we tap into the consumer, the whole behavior changes. Whether it's sleep, it's purchase, whether it's media, And given that we're talking about our platform and we mainly focus on content, we see how the whole viewership changes dynamics. So usually I have like fluctuations, but however, in Ramadan you start somehow with low viewership and then it goes all the way up again after iftar, and then it drops down a little after iftar, and then
Fascinating.
so what happens again? So the consumer is there. So you've got, given that we're a content platform, we move with the consumers wherever they are. So
Right.
if they're on the road going to work, this is where we hit them with radio.
Right.
And then they're coming back home, we hit them with radio. Even like the morning and the evening
Slots.
slots that usually are the peak times.
Yeah.
at that
That changes.
That changes.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they're home. It's time to wind down. This is where we go into the easy content. So behavior completely changes. Even the consumers are more receptive to content that is actually talking to them and in a natural way, in a very subtle way, where they can feel, oh, okay, fine. And this is where they can earn the trust of brands that are giving them what they need in a very genuine way, rather than like, I'm just bombarding them with commercials here, advertising there, and all of that. And one thing to note on the screen time, so screen time will change, but it is what it is for us, because we've got TV. This is the family viewing. Everybody's sitting together, they're always watching. Then we move on to Shahad. Shahad numbers, they go off the roof. We hit almost more than 35 unique million users in Ramadan.
Wow.
Alone across the region. And so that's your second screen, if you want to say. And then you always have social media. We're all on social media. It's there. And our channels are also on social media. And this is, so the way I consume media is completely different than the way you consume it, than the way somebody else does.
Right.
So imagine I'm there, I like it, I sit home, I watch my shows on TV, and then you go and you open your VOD or your OTT and you watch your show based on your own time.
Right.
But then somebody else who has no time, or like doesn't watch, he just goes on the social platforms and he watches those simple small snippets that we just and we literally have snippets all day long, all Ramadan long.
That is brilliant. So, and this is interesting because we've spoken about content, we've spoken about consumers, but what you just said about platforms also, it has a very strong brand element there, because brands nowadays want to be in as many channels, not just, carpet bomb everything, but in terms of being at the right place at the right time for the right consumer in the right moment, right? And part of that strategy that they have now has become a seamless cross-platform integration, so to speak, that they're looking for across linear TV, like you mentioned, across social media, across radio, across CTV, across streaming platforms, right? When you speak to a brand, when you are, having that conversation, like a podcast, a coffee with a brand, what comes up as an ideal format of, if you're looking at an integrated campaign, this is how you should do it, without watering down the messaging, to ensure that messaging is consistent across all of these platforms, but it's still driving those brand and performance metrics that we're looking for.
Yeah. So to just simplify things, again, we're a huge content network, and we've got our linear TV, we've got our social, we've got our chat. What we tend to tell brands is make sure that you use every platform differently.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
We can't just use the same
message
in
the same way everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the reason why we have all of this clout is because we need to complement the user journey on our platforms, and the same thing needs to happen through messaging. Right. So the message has to change from one platform to the other, and it all depends on the briefs, right? So the earlier you get a brief from a client, the more room for ideas there are, because again, Ramadan programs are shot really early on.
Yeah, like 6-7 months before.
And sometimes they're shot like the cooking show is a live show, so you
have seasons and episodes, and
you can just shoot on the day.
Right.
Yet the earlier you have a brief, which is also a challenge these days, because you're ending the year and you're stepping into
a new one.
Into a new one. It's
but
cute.
So your strategy has to be there and forward at the same time.
Absolutely. So if you have a brief really early on, and you give it to us. And this is where we always advise clients, agencies, and partners for us to all have a coffee table, sit down, let's discuss, let's see what can we do and what can't we do and what needs to be done, so that if we're really pushing a strategy or like a communication really early on, this is where the client or a brand can benefit the most.
I see what you mean. Interesting. Building on that same conversation, I also want to focus on the fact that, okay, there are so many platforms. There is so much content to watch. So much. Like, I don't think if I sat and I just spent my entire life watching only content, I would still finish all the content that this world has to offer, right? And that conversation goes into this conversation of media clutter, you know. There is so much content out there, and it's fighting for our time. It's fighting for our attention. So in that context, and I mean, I won't even touch this whole shelf of AI slop that is out there right now, right? But in the context of good content, right? How can brands differentiate themselves, be distinctive, and say these are the type of content that we need to work towards to actually ensure that we're getting the bang for our buck, that, you know, there is measurable returns for every dollar that is spent, invested in these sort of content formats and platforms?
This is something that I would say is very simple, yet it's very complicated. So first of all, if you're producing an ad, just as a simple regular spot campaign, make it resonate with the audience. Right. Make it as cultural as possible. Make it for the month of Ramadan. If it's a spot, then let it connect with the audience. This is like as simple as it gets, but looking back and going again, we start early, then this is where you can get your brand in the storyline of our shows. And our shows are consumed, again, reach is there, we know it, we have the numbers, we have the data, the attention is there, and there's so many advertisers around there. Everybody's advertising in Ramadan. Right. Literally everybody's advertising in Ramadan.
I mean, like 20 to 25% of annual budgets is spent during Ramadan at this point,
Absolutely. So what better way than to actually get your brand in the storyline of our shows, and you're actually, people are there, they're connecting with their best actors, they're connecting with the show that they love the most, and they're seeing their brand giving them the right messages there. So, and that goes from being on TV or linear, it becomes a content partnership rather than a linear TV.
It's not, you're not speaking to people, it's just ingrained within. And that goes into a very interesting point, because what you're talking to goes beyond these legacy traditional product placements or product ads that, you know, break away from the content. Okay, so you've got a intermission, so to speak, you know, between your show, to actually going the next step where that product is content integrated within the storyline, like you were just mentioning.
Yes.
So it doesn't break away. There's no, you know, there's still active attention on screen. It's not passive attention saying, well, let me go get a glass of water while this is happening and then come back, right? Has that changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So back in the days, we used to have like, and we still have that, by the way, as part of our offering. Like if you're in the show and you see a can here, or if you see something else there, this is the normal product placement. However, what we're trying to do is like we embed the messages of that specific brand that they wanna like give out to the audience as part of the show. So we changed the whole script of a specific show for that brand.
Interesting.
That's because they came early, right? We have that luxury. Also, let's say a client has his own idea that he wants to come out with, and this is where we come and we say, okay, fine, you know what, this idea is so big that it needs to become a bespoke content for you.
Right.
Let's create a mini series for you. We'll put it on Shahid. We'll promote it across the whole network, and we've seen that with a lot of brands that have done that on our platform, and it did really well because, again, it needs to make sense for that audience. Once you find that click, that really genuine content that you're actually throwing out to the audience, then they're going to connect with you. And that lives on Shahid. Sometimes it lives on social media, sometimes it lives on linear TV, sometimes it lives on radio. So it depends on the idea, but whatever that idea is, we have a solution for it across the whole ecosystem of MMS.
One of the words that you used just now is results, right? And I'll pick on that because you said it brings great results and you've seen great results. And that's for me is very, very important because, I mean, end of 2025, start of 2026, there is still a great focus on where's my ROI?
Yeah.
You know, what am I going to get out of it? What's the return? Not just from a performance point of view, not just from a brand awareness, not just from consideration, but also actual conversions, right? Can you give me, I mean, I can go on with this podcast for another hour, but I do need to wrap up. But before we wrap up, can you give me a few examples of good Ramadan campaigns that have had great results? And what part of that campaign actually drove those results?
Sure. So I'm not going to go into the client or like specify brands, but circling back to your point about results, if I might take just a few more seconds here on that front. So we've got, again, you've got the reach, you've got the simple measurement tools that we use, which is like impressions and views and all of that.
Yeah.
But again, at MMS, we have a whole entity that looks after data. And that data is not just numbers. That data is qualitative data. We always run our BLSs with clients. We run MMMs. And recently we've done 2 MMMs. I'm not sure if but again, we've done 2 MMMs that show the power of TV into consideration and for sales. So few clients have actually increased their sales because of what they've done with us. So from a measurement perspective, we always link it to the data team. There's always like a data
angle
to it. It's no longer about, again,
it's not traditional metrics that you're saying. It's not just reach, frequency, impression, views, but there is a little more meat to that. Just you're actually showing the value that you're bringing through other metrics that go beyond just the basic vanity metrics.
True, because to your point, it's all about ROI, right?
Right.
And ROI is no longer about if I'm hitting the impressions. Right. It's about if the audience is buying, right? It's all about sales.
Yeah.
It's all about consideration. It's all about.
Is it moving from the warehouse? Is the product moving from the shelf? Is there brand recall? Is there a brand lift sentiment around it? Yeah.
Absolutely, and we cover all of that across the whole ecosystem. So that was just a quick point on data and results. Yeah. Again, there's no secret recipe here. It's about coming to us early with the right brief and all of us sitting together once, twice, 3 times, even digging deeper until we come up, you know what's going to work for you is a bespoke content that's going to live on Shahid, and then we're going to push another show. This show works perfectly for this brand, so this is where we go in content. So as long as you come to us really early on, we are confident and we know that we will make any campaign successful as long as you come with an open mind first. We work together and you listen to us somehow.
I think the secret there is then collaboration. It's also starting early. It's having that conversation that goes beyond just an ad, a campaign. It's understanding brand. It's understanding what their values are. What are they trying to get? And it's not about which product fits best. It's about what value can you get out of each activation that you do, or what value can you derive from being in the right place, on the right platform, in the right manner to connect with those very specific hyperlocal audiences. I love this chat. I think we should have this one again. Thank you for joining us. Before we close, any parting messages, any final things that you want to share with our brand marketing audience?
Our network is so big that we can cover anything, right? But the main thing for us today, I'll just close with a few key points again. Getting early on, being open-minded, and we've got the solutions, we've got the data to cover it, and I'll leave it here. It's just that I think we've covered so much that I don't have any more a closing.
It's a point that we just say, come see experience, come sit, chat with us, and we'll take it from there. I think that's great. I love this chat with you, Nicolas. Thank you for joining us here today.
My pleasure.
It's been great. And that's a wrap on this episode of Campaign Middle East on the Record podcast. Stay tuned for more such wonderful conversations with leaders in the industry. That's all for now. And until next time, goodbye.